This is the Hunt Quietly podcast. I'm Matt Ranella. Hey, dear listener, I want to see if I can get your help with something. You know, it's an incontrovertible fact that high quality, publicly accessible, non-pay hunting is in free fall decline in this country. And we're trying to do something about that, man. That's one of the main things we focus on in this podcast. Additionally, we also have a nonprofit, Hunters for Access, that tries to counteract negative trends in hunting access by showing appreciation to landowners that are enrolled in state-run programs that allow public hunting access. And we got a lot of events coming up, man. And some of these events cost money. We're hosting appreciation dinners to support access in Wyoming through the Access Yes program. We're hosting another appreciation dinner in Kansas in support of the walk-in hunter access program. We have multiple appreciation dinners that we're attending where we're going to be giving out a lot of very nice door prizes in Montana. And we need your help with this, man. Like, hunters should just be behind Hunters for Access. Even if you don't live in those states I mentioned. We have things going on in other states as well, and we're trying to get chapters up and running in other states to support other state-run programs. But even if you never hunt in a state that's been touched by Hunters for Access, there's still a strong case to be made that you should be supporting our organization because it's all connected, man. The higher quality the hunting is in state A, the less likely people are going to be to crowd and lease and buy up exclusive hunting property in state B. It's all connected. We're all in this together. When we improve hunt quality in one state, it has all kinds of positive spillover effects in other states. So, yeah, it's just the case that hunters throughout this country should support Hunters for Access. And there's really two ways you can do this. You can go to huntersforaccess.org and make a direct contribution there. And I really, really encourage you to do this. And another thing you could do if you wanted to support the Hunt Quietly message, in addition to supporting Hunters for Access, you can go to huntquietly.org and buy our merch. When you buy our merch, 100% of the proceeds go to supporting Hunters for Access. And Hunters for Access is not a traditional quote-unquote hunting conservation nonprofit where it's like they do something positive with 20 cents on the dollar and use the other 80 cents for R3 and advertising and salaries. 0% of the money you give to Hunters for Access goes to salaries, advertising, R3. 100% goes to showing appreciation to landowners in this country that provide public hunting access. If you're concerned about the future of hunting in this country, high quality, publicly accessible, non-pay hunting, then I can't think of a better way to direct your philanthropic expenditures than by supporting Hunters for Access. So please, man, help take the stress off of trying to keep this nonprofit going and get these events funded and make a contribution. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for joining me.
Appreciate you having me.
So remind me where you live?
So I currently live in Hawley, Pennsylvania. It's kind of that top northeast corner where I'm only about 20 minutes from New York, 20 minutes from New Jersey.
Oh, how far are you from Lake Erie?
Probably about a 5 or 6 hour drive.
Oh, is that the closest Great Lake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Lake Ontario might be a little bit closer to where I am, just in terms of cutting there, going north instead of going to Erie.
Yeah. What do you do?
I do a lot of right now. I've been mainly limited to ice fishing. When I was in college. I went to college in Massachusetts, and I kind of
No,
got
I meant for a living.
right now. I'm trying to get my PhD, go back to grad school. I recently finished up a position as a field technician with Friends of the Upper Delaware River. Before that, I was a fishery biologist aide for Pennsylvania Fish and Boat
Oh,
Commission.
okay. Good. We're going to talk about fishing and you're qualified.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. I just went ice fishing last weekend myself.
Yeah. You having that same cold weather blast up by you were having here?
No, it's been a pussycat of a winter.
Oh,
If it was
really?
if it was any milder, there wouldn't be ice to fish on, you know?
Huh. It's been
Yeah.
pretty remarkable here. I grew up here, and outside of going to college, I spent my whole life here. And for the past like 5 or 6 years, it's been the same trend. We only get like a week of ice fishing a lot of those years, and
Oh,
the Delaware River is frozen clean over in a lot of sections where you can walk from one side to the other in a way that I haven't seen since I was 7 years old.
oh,
So it's
wow.
been pretty interesting to see it. Kind of crazy to see the power of nature in a way that I haven't gotten to see in a few years up here.
Yeah. Are you going to tiptoe out there and fish?
I've tried it a little bit. I used to do a lot of river ice fishing when I was in Massachusetts, and I fell through the ice one time, and luckily there was enough open water. I ended up not getting stuck. But that moment of like falling through the ice and being stuck in the current and not being able to find the hole, probably the scariest thing I've ever experienced
Oh,
outdoors. And
man.
kind of ever since then, even when it's like right now it's like 10 inches, but I still just have that in the back of my mind to like, if I fall through here and I miss that hole, there's no open water I can find downriver. I
Like
might
how far fast you think it's flowing under there?
It's not too fast, but I could have just been a fluke when I fell through. I was on the Housatonic, and it was a pretty slow. It's kind of like a big meandering river, almost like a mini Mississippi in a way with those big oxbows. And I fell in a slow section, and just in like the 3 or 4 seconds of disorientation, I couldn't find the hole right above me when I fell in that time. And luckily, there,
Yeah.
like I said, it was an oxbow, so the current picked up. And just in that like fight or flight, I had the realization like if I swim forward like 20 feet to the open current, I'll get out. But ever since then, the frozen rivers have scared me quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I live on the Yellowstone, the lower Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And sometimes the the little back eddies and whatnot will freeze over. I fished out there once,
Yeah.
but my good friend that works for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, our state
Yeah.
fish and wildlife management agency, and his job is doing maintenance on all of our fishing access sites.
Yeah.
And several years ago, he ran into a guy at a fishing access site that lost his best friend when his best friend fell through the ice on the Yellowstone.
That's awful.
Yeah, the dude, the guy that died, he didn't show up back home,
Yeah.
and the guy that was telling my friend this story went looking for him, and he kind of felt like he was down at the river fishing or whatever. And sure enough, he finds him, and he's frozen stiff. His elbows are on the ice and he's in the water, dead, with his boots sitting next to him.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like he took his boots off because of hypothermia, but the crazy thing is,
He probably took them off because he was trying to get more leverage to get out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those boots are heavy when they're full of water.
Yeah.
Do you use picks?
Ever since then, I've never gotten out without the picks. That the fear of God into me, where I was like, after not having the picks right there, I never go out without them now.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not from an ice fishing culture, yeah, the picks are like, you'd imagine two ice picks that you carry around your neck on a rope or something like that. They're a little fancier than that. And that way when you fall in, you can stick them in the ice and pull yourself out. The alternative is to not clip your fingernails.
Oh yeah.
So you let me get my head around this. You got your undergraduate, and then you worked as did you say a fish tech, or what did you say?
I was a fishery biologist aide for the Fish and Boat Commission. So I worked directly under the fishery biologist, doing field data, helping with the biologist reports under their supervision, helping with data collection, kind of overseeing the management process, not really having too much of a management stake myself in terms of showing up to the meeting and having a voice, but getting to observe the entire process, help out with things like my main responsibility when I was there. I did a lot of otolith work, so we were removing the otoliths from shad and trout from the West Branch of the Delaware to try to correlate the size of the fish to different age ranges to help with long-term management.
Okay. And then when you stopped working for the state, you started working for, what was that foundation?
Friends of the Upper Delaware River. They're a nonprofit located on the West Branch, and they work a lot with New York City and the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission in terms of negotiating water releases and water rights in terms of how much water gets distributed to New York City for drinking water versus how much gets to stay in the river.
Okay, and you're still with them.
No, I'm no longer. Currently, I'm just working at a fly fishing shop in Hawley.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
Kind of try to transfer into grad school, go to my PhD, get the next step.
Yeah. What do you think about the? Well, I'll ask you that next. Let's finish this thread. So, what do you want to study in grad school?
My main interests are fishery management in terms of stock management, stock assessments, things like that, kind of trying to improve management from the side to improve the mathematical and data side. Because from my experience, when I was in college, I wasn't as interested in that stuff, but working in actual fishery management, it seems like there's not a single meeting that goes by without the topic of, can we trust this data? I don't trust the scientists. I don't trust the data. And a lot of the time, at least in fishery management, we're counting fish in the ocean, and there's a pretty high percent of standard error, a low degree of confidence, where it's really informed by science. We can't ever count exactly how many fish are in the ocean. So it's a thing that we're constantly working with trying to get the public on the same page and actually trust the data that we're putting out.
I see. So you'd like your degree to have a quantitative bent to it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That was what my thesis mainly focused on. I did PCA analysis and a lot of weird atypical statistical analysis of striped bass stocks to try to identify any weird trends that stood out that weren't being recognized by MRIP or some of the current standards we have that recognize it as an entire stock and don't really tease out some of the individual stocks like the Hudson River, Delaware River, Chesapeake stock, for example, to potentially maybe notice some of these declines before it gets to the point of crisis when individual fisheries are declining instead of looking at the whole coastwide stock.
Okay. When I was a PhD student, I guess you could call me a mathematical ecologist. The vast majority of my projects have a pretty strong mathematical component to them. And when I was a PhD student, I took classes under a guy that he was a mathematician, and he worked on fisheries, and he worked on marine mammals a lot. So small world. His name is Dan Goodman.
Yeah.
And do you know that name?
I think I've came across that name in some of the like acoustic tagging research I've read.
Okay. He was the most fascinating person I've ever met. Just unbelievably bright and articulate and interesting. He really changed my career trajectory because I just found what he did very inspirational. So I really doubled down on learning quantitative techniques, and I took a bunch of like math stats while I was studying with him, because I was studying with him. And really everything I've done since graduate school, I've prioritized learning math and statistical techniques throughout my career and applying them, and that's all because of how inspiring I found him to be. There's a Wikipedia page devoted to him.
I'll have to look into him a little bit deeper.
Yeah. When he died a number of years ago, there was a symposium for him at Montana State University, and that's pretty special. Like, they don't do that for everybody. That is for sure, And I went to it, and many of his former graduate students and colleagues were there, and there was a lot of them gave talks, and it was really like a fitting memorial to a very, very bright, useful person. I remember I took this population biology class from him, and I walk in, and like the first day of the class, he's talking about the sea lion population. He's like, they're subject to this fecundity rate, and this and that, like some of their demographic parameters. And then he launches into a bunch of equations. And for 2 weeks, it's just nothing but equations. And then after like 2 weeks, it's like, and so do sea lions.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it feels looking at a lot of this data sometimes, where it's just so interconnected when you're looking at, even when it's mammals, there's just so many variables when it comes to, I mean, from hunting, it's the same exact thing. There's human pressure, but there's so many examples of times where we've eliminated human pressure and some variable that we're not expecting or not even accounting for ends up continuing to cause the population decline or some other unforeseen event happens.
Yeah. Hence PCA analysis, like you were talking about. I took a class on PCA analysis from this guy. I got more exposure to it after that. But in the working example, we were working on a real data set when I was taking that class, and he was trying to understand why stellar sea lion populations were declining in Southeast Alaska. And he had a zillion variables, this big data set. And I want to say that, like, the variable that shook out was like Pollock numbers near the haul outs or something like. I think that's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting stuff.
I mean, it's become a lot more relevant. It's still a pretty weak concept for a lot of the states, but for fishery management, some of the coastal states have been trying to adopt this thing called ecological reference points, where they try to correlate different species together to see. And some of the stronger correlations that are pretty backed up by the science are things like, as the striped bass population boomed and exploded after the moratorium, the weak fish population declined and kind of got forced out of its niche, just in the sense that they were both weak populations. The striper population expanded a little bit faster, took some of those food sources, and they've managed to make some pretty interesting connections with things like menhaden populations and ospreys down in the bay, where as the menhaden population decreases, the rate of osprey recruitment and nest failure, or recruitment goes down and nest failure increases. So I think it's a very promising future for especially coastal management, where it's so interconnected. All these systems are open systems where some of these fisheries, like striped bass, were sharing them all the way from Virginia up to Maine.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's enough about your academic background. What do you think about? Are you aware of this last year? This recreational boating and fishing foundation getting defunded.
Which specific association is that?
The Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation. They're a nonprofit that was funded by. They're funded by Dingle Johnson dollars, and they got doged.
I might not. I don't want to overspeak because I could be combining two different things, but I did hear a little bit about that. If they're an affiliate of the American Sport Fishing Association.
Yep. They are.
I definitely
they ran the Take Me Fishing program.
There's a lot of complications with that organization. I want to be careful with my language just in terms of legality and making sure I don't say anything that could get anyone in trouble. But a lot of the stuff I've heard from people involved with the organization or people that used to be involved with the organization and have left is that there's a little bit of that was a kind of a situation, a bite in the hand that feeds you. They cozied up to Doge. There's a lot of funding from ASA that goes to these right-wing politicians. I mean, both sides as well, but specifically in that region, some very right-wing politicians and some of the members cozied up to Doge, and it was part of this.
Some of the employees, you mean? I don't know if they had like members outside.
Not of the smaller affiliate, but of ASA as a whole.
Okay.
They've become a massive trade organization over the past around 15 to 20 years.
What's that, a trade organization?
So have you ever heard of ICAST, that big fishing event they do down in Florida where all the tackle companies and boating companies go? And it's like a big show where they show off all their new equipment. But the weird thing about it is you can only go if you're invited. It's like an industry insider thing of all the influencers and YouTubers get invited. So then they make videos talking about how awesome the new boat from Mercury or motor from Mercury is, or the new reel from Shimano is. And ASA pretty much runs that, and it's one of the many, many things they do. They started off as a conservation organization.
Really? This is interesting.
And they ballooned into a trade organization, and they have a PAC. They have a political action fund, and you may have heard of it, Keep America Fishing or Keep Florida Fishing. And that was what made me think so much of talking to you, because it's very heavily tied into R3 and a lot of those efforts and trying to redirect a lot of conservation funding more into recruitment and retainment. And it's pretty interesting. They don't even try to.
They probably do. Okay. So I just want to get my head around how they're funded. Do they apply for some like Dingle Johnson grants, or are they funded and they get donations from the fishing industry, I imagine?
Yeah. The interesting thing is if you look at their board, there's not a single person low down on their board, someone who has an honorary position. He has a role at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, but everyone on their executive board, they're all just tackle industry members or boating industry members. It's the head of Shimano. It's the head of AFTCO. It's the head of an outdoor media brand. I forget the exact name.
Okay.
It's pretty much entirely controlled by industry interests, but publicly they portray themselves to this day as a conservation organization.
That sounds very familiar. I mean,
yeah,
to an extent that we could dicker about. That's like every major hunting and fishing nonprofit,
pretty much. And the thing that's been really interesting above all else to me is when I first started looking, it was kind of a just strange coincidence of the Fisherman magazine funded my bachelor's thesis when I was doing it.
And that's a ASA publication?
They're not funded fully by the ASA, but they have a very close relationship with them where they're very often doing interviews with the head of the ASA or the public spokesperson for the ASA, Mike Ween, and parroting talking points when fishery management meetings come up. At the last striped bass meeting, the ASA published one letter that it was a mass sign-on letter to try to influence the management process. And then the fishermen public, or not the fishermen as a whole, but the editor for the magazine reposted that article, shared it with all these tackle shops throughout the entire coast of New Jersey, and very heavily influenced the management process in a way that was pretty shocking at just how effective they were, because the prior vote was 90% of recreational anglers voted in terms of a conservation practice, whether there wasn't a specific one we all agreed on, but
Well,
90%.
could you flesh this out for me a little bit? Like, what were they trying to pass, and was it a good thing or was it a bad thing? Like, lay it out for me.
So it was Amendment 7, and it was in 2022. And it basically, the angler comment was basically just, do the recreational anglers believe that something needs to be done, or should we keep the status quo? And then from there, we'll decide exactly what.
In what state?
That was for the whole ASMFC. So the states, everywhere where stripers were fished for, from Maine down to Virginia.
Okay. So it wasn't like a bill to enact some change in the way they were managed?
It was a completely new management process, because there was a new amendment that had been put in place that if certain thresholds were reached, like the stock recruitment had failed for X amount of years or the stock dropped below X level, that the ASMFC had to take emergency action, or they had the authority to take emergency action. So this was an unprecedented process because this was an emergency action. So it was kind of a new thing that hadn't really been done in mid-Atlantic fishery management before. And the original feedback, or the feedback for that, showed 90% of or all anglers, not just recreational anglers, supported some form of conservation measure compared to the current regulations.
Okay.
And then all I was going to add on, in the next round of measures in 2025, when the next round of amendments came up, it was pretty shocking how much that disparity had changed, where it went from 90% of anglers supporting those measures to a very clean 49-50% vote, almost split right down the middle. But 90+% of the people that signed on for status quo signed on to 2 sign-on letters, mass distributed by the ASA and the fishermen. So if those mass sign-on,
so why is the ASA oppose like cutting back on the take of the stripers if it's in the best interest of the fish? Why? Am I right in thinking that's what this is?
If you think about it for a little bit, that's what you'd think. But it's hard to see from the outside whether it's. I always try to attribute the best values. I don't want to.
Well, what did this article say?
Well, the original article I was discussing with them, like you're talking about the one with them advocating for.
I thought that this article was like, I'm just trying to get my head around all this. I thought the article in what's the magazine, Fisherman?
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that the article in Fisherman said, we don't need more regulations on striper. This is BS. And then that made the angling community go, oh, okay, I was in favor of more conservation of the striper, but now that I've read this article, I don't think we need more conservation of the striper. Am I not?
Exactly.
Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
So okay, so then again, I'm just curious. Why? Yeah, you were going to say you don't like to assign, like a reason when you're unsure, but just speculating. Why do you think ASA was opposed to, I don't know, dialing back catch on the striper if that was in the best interest of the population?
I think it very much is related to the fact that the effort for the species has declined, and that the stripers make up the majority of angling trips in the Northeast. More than any
people aren't fishing for them as much anymore? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, over the past, COVID has skewed a lot of that data, because during period of COVID, more people were fishing in a lot of these states than ever.
Okay, you're just saying since 2020, fewer people are fishing for stripers.
Yeah, so it's hard to tease out how much of the decline is people returning back to work and not having that time now that they aren't working remotely, and how much of it is people saying, hey, the striper fishing near me has been pretty bad recently. I don't want to pay a captain $500 when I don't think I'm going to have a good day. And it's been a hard thing to tease out of exactly which one of those. And it's probably, in my opinion, kind of an equal balance of both. From talking to a lot of captains, it seems like a lot of the captains are struggling because people are telling them, I know the fishing hasn't been good. I don't necessarily want to go out when all of these places are telling me the striper fishery is collapsing. There's been 8 years of recruitment that have been at a level that can't sustain the fishery. It's $700 to go with the guide. I'll go fish for flounder or go on the party boat for something instead.
Yeah,
So
it makes sense to me. Like the fishing shittier and people are busier. So
exactly.
okay, so now I'm gonna need to connect that up with why ASA is opposed to instituting like reductions in take.
So to understand that, you need to understand ASA falls under a kind of larger umbrella where of groups they're not officially affiliated with, but they've formed a very strong association with over the past decade. One of those groups is the CCA, and both of those groups,
What does that stand for?
the Coastal Conservation Alliance.
Oh, and I'm imagining that they're not strictly a conservation organization. They've got some kind of like
Exactly. Not anymore, but they used to be a great organization. But the thing that's really interesting about them is there's a lot of very public stuff because one of the leaders of the former higher ups of the organization, I forget his exact role, Tony Friedrich, he left due to what the organization was becoming, and he founded the American Saltwater Guides Association. And their co-founder of the national committee, or their co-vice chair of the National Committee for Government Relations, Charles Whittock, he also left around the same period due to industry interests taking over the CCA. So there's a lot of very interesting writing available online, and those two sources are great for kind of getting a deeper understanding of the stuff that was going on when I was a little kid, when those two industries first started selling out to these industry interests.
So
And
both CCA and ASA over time have become less interested and focused on conservation and how you say, I don't know, maintaining fishing quality for the fishing community, and more like the handmaiden for the fishing industry. Is that
yeah,
okay?
that's my argument that if you look at the board of these two organizations, especially over the recent years, if you look at a lot of these fisheries that currently are in a pretty controversial place management-wise, things like red drum, things like striped bass, they're consistently on the side of advocating for no regulations or hand all power over to the state, take it away from the federal government, and we don't have any opinion on what the state should do from there, but the state should have all power in managing this fishery.
How about this? Like, what would you agree with this? That the reason that the ASA and the, what is it, CCA,
Yeah.
they don't like reducing limits or shortening seasons or whatever, uh like increased fishing regulations. They don't like it because they won't sell as much tackle.
I would 100% agree with that notion, and I would only extend it to say it also includes boats, motors, and all the things that fall under that trade umbrella.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is great. I mean, this is what I see with the hunting nonprofits. This is just another example. Yeah. I mean, this is great. Like, it's just really true that there's too close of a relationship between the quote unquote conservation organizations and the industry. I mean, like, how in the world did we ever conclude? Nobody really, I guess, probably just explicitly concluded this, but it's kind of implicit that what's good for these industries is good for the resource and good for the existing user group. Isn't that a shame?
Yeah. I mean,
Money gets Money gets involved in everything. Yeah.
It's pretty. There's a quote from Charles Whittick that I read a while ago. I think I have it directly in front of me. Maybe I don't, but it was basically that the only chance, and it was pretty interesting to me as someone who's the former co-vice chair of this same committee, coming out 20 years later and saying the only chance the future of these coastal fisheries have is if conservation-minded anglers find a way to come together and pile together both their political influence, but also their financial influence to actually support some of these other organizations, start their own one, show up to these meetings, whatever it takes to actually put the power back in our own hands. Because before I worked as a biologist, I had this idea of I'm going to go to the state, I'm going to be that positive change, go to those meetings and represent what the science actually says instead of what I'm told to say. And then you work for the state and you realize at least most of these biologists, they all want to do the right thing. Most of these fishery managers, even the ones that are saying the wrong things in the meeting, want to do the right things. They're just put in this situation of these agencies are underfunded and they have to make a deal with the devil. You have to make a deal with this organization that will help with funding in the short term or help with marketing, especially for some of these agencies like Pennsylvania that relies predominantly on fishing licenses and boating registrations for sales. And you don't want to bother or make these agency or these groups upset with you and lose that marketing, lose all the magazines they're putting you in that are leading to higher fishing license sales, higher boating registration sales.
Oh, this is a tension that, I think is nationwide. It's certainly the case in my state, what you're saying. Another thing that gets between the science and the management is, in addition to like, how would you encapsulate what you said? Just like the need to make sales, sell licenses, and sell products is I don't know if this is true there, but here it's that there's a lot of politics involved. So we have this game commission, and when they're thinking about setting seasons or changing the borders of hunting districts or whatever, it's not just about what's good for the resources for the resource and what's good for the greatest good and the greatest number of hunters. It's also, there's a lot of like what's going to generate the most revenue for guides and for large landowners and things like that, it's tough, man. Like, it's tough. I hope that there's some kind of correction with all of that for you, for you and people like you, young folks that want to do good science and have the best science direct management, because it does seem like there's a lot of too many other factors involved in how the decision making happens for the resource, and then it's just like what you've laid out it's just so sad. So you got these these groups that started out as like probably legitimate conservation organizations, and now they are advocating for less conservation measures because they're trying to sell tackle.
Yeah. Pretty much. The thing that's been the most depressing about seeing the process from all the different perspectives, from working for a nonprofit, working for the state, is kind of realizing that in fishery management, especially for coastal fisheries more than anything else, where there's a commercial market, where I feel like that's the thing that really makes this particular application of these nonprofits even more sinister than in inland fisheries or the hunting industry, where it has its negative impacts. But at this point in the in the coastal fisheries, a lot of these groups are representing commercial fishermen while publicly telling out publicly coming out and saying their stakeholder, their shareholder they represent is the recreational fishermen.
Oh, well, that's a
And-
whole other wrinkle.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think at the end of the day, you look at how much money people spend in these different industries. Just like hunting, there's the average Joe who spends the amount he can spend in the hobby. He's not going out spending thousands of dollars on different trail cams and things like that to make crazy videos. He just spends what he has to spend to go hunting. Then there's the guides and fishing industry. There's the commercial guys that need thousands of dollars, electronics and things like that. So
When you're talking about commercial guys, are you talking about guides or are you talking about commercial fishermen?
I'm talking about commercial fishermen. I'm
Okay.
going to say guys, not guides. Sorry.
So does ASA and what was the other one?
CCA.
CCA, do they have a lot strong connections with the commercial fisheries?
I think it really, if you look at it from the financial side, it comes down to who can just give them the most money in whatever circumstance. In certain cases, like Menhaden, where the commercial fishery is run by one stakeholder and it's a non-American brand that owns that extraction like fishery, they feel very comfortable publicly coming out time and time again for conservation measures against that fishery for the combination of the fact that they have no interest with that particular stakeholder. They're not giving them money. It's a Canadian brand and it's a massive trawl fishery. It's not a hook and line fishery where their industry investors benefit from it. And there's also not recreational anglers spending money to go buy gear to fish for Menhaden. So in that case, they can step out and speak up for conservation. But when it comes to something like striped bass, where there's both a commercial fishery and a recreational fishery where their industry makers are making money, I think they have a vested interest in both, where they're representing the commercial fishermen when it's convenient and using their voice when it's convenient. And when it's not convenient, just throwing them to the side and going back to their industry voices.
Okay. Well, and this provides another motivation for not instituting restrictions on take when they're warranted is if ASA and CCA are in bed with the commercial fisheries, the commercial fishermen don't want to see their allotments reduced.
And the interesting thing is there's been two cases, probably more, but two cases I've seen where it's come full circle, where these fisheries have gone to such a degraded point due to this prolonging of regulation that these smaller commercial fishermen come back and sue the ASMFC and sue the state because it's now gotten to the point that they can't even go out and commercially fish for these species anymore. And they're suing the state for mismanagement and not following the Magnus Stevenson's guidelines, prolonging management when they knew that the fishery was overfished and still allowing overfishing to occur. So
it's like, so you're saying like the big guys can still find fish, but the little, because they have better equipment or bigger boats and can go further, but the small guy can't? Is that what
exactly?
Wow. Yeah.
The more accessible reefs closer to shore get hammered heavily by the guys in the small 16-foot, 18-foot skiffs that can afford to go out there. Their boat can handle it. But you think about the sites 5-10 miles offshore, your gear, but it becomes a lot more restrictive in terms of the gear you need to be able to safely access some of those fishing sites that experience less pressure.
So does ASA and CCA have like dues paying workaday fishermen as members?
They do. They spend a lot of money on marketing, and it's very similar to hunting, where it's typically portrayed as an angler's rights issue, where they portray it as we're fighting for more access for you against the boogeyman who wants to ban your ability to fish. But the thing that's really interesting about it is the only recent time in the Northeast, in terms of the fishery management I'm well aware of, that a no closure has even been proposed has been a direct result of the ASA fighting vehemently against the other conservation options that were on the table, like a tighter slot and things like that. So it got to the point the only way to achieve lower recruitment and lower harvest and lower effort would be to implement a moratorium or a no targeting window. And then it's almost like they're trying to create these scandals that they can use to then advertise, fight against the conservation measures for 2 or 3 years until the only option left is a moratorium. And then you can send out the letter telling everyone the government wants to ban your ability to fish.
So when did ASA, when was it founded?
I believe they were founded in the late 90s or early 2000s.
Was it by a handful of people that were concerned about fisheries and conservation?
Yeah, it originally was a small grassroots organization where a lot of the things they were involved in early was things like the dolphin net, like dolphins being caught in those trawling nets, and things like the billfish fishery and the bluefin fishery. And they made real efforts to actually fight for conservation, especially for a lot of these more charismatic species.
Oh, and then just insidiously over time, they became the puppet of the fishing industry and the commercial fishermen.
Exactly.
Well, the fishing
And the
industry.
weird thing is the funding, it's very obvious, just all of this stuff is public because they decided to make a PAC. So now you can just go online and see where this money's going. And this isn't speculation on my part. You can see the long list of trawlers that are donating to ASA, and it just makes you question why all these different commercial trawlers would be donating $4,999 right under the limit to an organization that allegedly is fighting for the access and rights of sport fishermen and private recreational anglers.
It'd be interesting to compile a list of policy statements for the ASA early on, right after they were founded. Policy statements and a breakdown of where their funding was coming from early on, and then contemporarily do the same thing. So now, what are their policy statements and where's their money coming from? You know what I mean? I mean, it's so cool to have that.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't even be that hard to do.
No, it wouldn't. It's very interesting too, just looking at it on a graph and seeing right around that period where a lot of the good people or people that I think of as solid individuals that care more about the conservation and science than making money, they all left together in a very short period.
Okay.
And when they left, that's when the organization's profits started to skyrocket.
Oh,
Like, they
man.
all saw the writing on the wall of, I don't
Yeah.
want where this is going. And it's almost like they took advantage of it, of like, okay, the safeguards are gone. There's no good people here left that care about preserving these fisheries. Let's fill the board with industry members.
Do you know any of those people?
I've spoken to Tony and I've spoken to Charles, two of the people that used to be involved with CCA. And Charles is really a gold mine. Charles Witek, his last name is Witek. He has a website called One Angler's Voyage, and he writes more than any person I've ever seen in my life. It's impressive how often he can get out an article, and it's a gold mine of information on how corrupt a lot of these organizations are in the Northeast.
Oh, well, let me write this down. What's the name of his website?
One Angler's Voyage.
And I imagine there's a way I can reach out to him.
Yeah, he's available on Facebook.
Oh, okay. OneAnglersVoyage.com. I'm going to reach out to him for sure, because this is something that is an abiding concern of mine, is the role of money in directing what happens at conservation organizations. And this is like it sounds like a particularly egregious example, you know.
Yeah, and he really is kind of just one of those shining lights of conservation, is someone who's kind of weeds through all the bullshit, doesn't care about politics or any of that other stuff.
Well, yeah, was he retired?
Yeah, I think he used to be a lawyer before he does some volunteer stuff. I think he's on the Highly Migratory Fish Committee or the Highly Migratory Species Committee, so not fully retired, but
okay. So he can say whatever he wants because he's not associated with, like, affiliated with, you know. That's what That's why I get to say whatever I want. Is because I make my living in a different sector.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, that was the kind of craziest thing as I really started to break into the industry and work for the state and kind of realized like I published that thesis and I like I was hinting at earlier, it was at first it was funded by the fishermen. And as I started to work on the thesis, the satellite tags that they were publishing all this information about, I figured out that it wasn't just me, but it's pretty evident just from the information about the tags that they weren't nearly as accurate as they were portraying them to be. And they were really only intended for highly migratory species that migrated far enough in a day that an inaccuracy range of 1 to 2 miles wouldn't really matter. You think of a sailfish, it travels far enough in a day that if every time it pings, it's a mile off, you still get a good track of what the fish did. You
Right.
put a tracker on a largemouth bass, and every single time it pings, it's a mile off in a pond that's only 2 miles, or you put it on a striped bass that's only migrating a few miles a day, that's a lot less
You
reliable.
might be pinging it from somebody's house.
Exactly.
Um,
And
wait, okay, so help me understand this. That was I'm a pretty slow thinker, so that was an abrupt change of topic
sorry
for
about
me. So lay that out for me now. Why is this relevant?
So that was part of the work that originally was part of my bachelor's thesis, and this was how I kinda stumbled upon the ASA because the fishermen funded this thesis, and then when the fisher
They
I
funded your thesis,
yeah,
your
and
undergraduate research project. They directed funding to it.
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, kinda complicated. They really just gave the money to Gray Fish Tag for tags, and then I was just the researcher discussing a lot of this. But the
Okay.
thing that's really interesting about it is when I tried to discuss this data and how I believed that the editor at the magazine, Jim Hutchinson, was misportraying it in his articles, he had no interest in hearing what I had to say.
Okay. So we got a lot. We got to break this way down from like you got to pretend that we know nothing because
Yeah.
we don't. So there's some geospatial data
Yeah.
on fish that you worked with,
Yeah.
and um, the guy at Fisherman Magazine was saying things about the making conclusions based on those data that you don't think were founded because the data were not precise enough to make those claims. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it could be pretty accurately summarized by just saying that his argument was that this new groundbreaking data showed that our current understanding of striped bass migration was so wrong that all the current data we were collecting was useless or close to useless, and it
Oh,
explained why we didn't need to take regulation. It's not that the fishery was declining, we're just not sampling where the fish are. They're migrating offshore along the Hudson Canyon or something like that in this new behavior pattern that we haven't figured out yet.
okay. And what you're saying is, okay, but you're saying he thought the data were more precise than you think they are, or less precise.
The easiest way to summarize it is for my thesis, I wanted to publish it academically, get it peer reviewed, and that data was so poor and inconclusive from my perspective. I removed almost all of it from my thesis entirely because I thought that that alone, using a sample size that small, where there's only been, I believe, somewhere between 8 and 13 fish tagged, and every tag has a range of inaccuracy of 1 to 3 miles, that the data was close to useless.
And
But
he
his
was using these
perspective
noisy data
was that it was substantive enough
to make claims that everything was okay.
exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. There's a part of me that thinks instead of getting becoming a fisheries biologist, you might have a more positive impact if you became like a watchdog. You know?
I mean, it might be the only option I have left with all the industry enemies I've been okay with
Well, man, never. I'll be your benefactor. Like I would rather see you continue to say what you really believe and pay your bills the rest of your life than have you like become a jukebox where you put money in and the person says whatever you want them to, you know? It's just not helpful. It's just not a helpful way to go through life. You need to you could be respectful about it, and that's probably a good idea, but you got to say what you really think, you know? And I just really hope that that's the route you take, man. Is you just continue to say what needs to be said, what really makes sense. Because it's like these people, these money people, they're just most of them are real polished. You know, they got the nice clothes and they're well spoken, and they'll just feed you a line of shit, and people will buy it because he's the dude. He's got the job. He's got the title. You know, but that's a problem, man. Because what really should dictate what people believe is the truth. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I don't know if you want to get a PhD in fisheries biology. I mean, it is kind of disconcerting how tightly connected everything is, but we gotta hope that there's a academic institution that won't care that you've raised concerns about what motivates some of these organizations. If I was looking for a graduate student, I would be more inclined to take one on that was willing to just say how they really thought things were. You know,
I mean, I think there's definitely a positive change going on in the kind of culture around this stuff, at least in my generation. I see it going
okay,
both ways, where a lot of this stuff, social media kind of has its way. The algorithm knows the stuff that gets you angry keeps you engaged. So it's good at showing you the worst stuff. But I see all these organizations like Captains for Clean Water and the American Saltwater Guides Association that have really found a way to push this message forward in a way that kind of brings in young people, brings in all the different stakeholders to help them realize whether you're
these are
look
other nonprofits.
yeah, they're much, much smaller nonprofits where
Okay,
they really stayed at
will they come out and say that they are concerned about what some of the other nonprofits will they be? Are they vocal about it?
I mean, it's pretty much a quiet war in a way, where
Okay,
I've spoken to a lot of people where the American Saltwater Guides Association specifically, there's a lot of ill will towards them from the American Sport Fishing Association. One great example of that is they made just a silly Instagram post like a year or two ago making fun of the ASA for the way, forget even what it was an Instagram meme, but it was just some silly thing. And the ASA brought it up to the ASMFC as an ethics complaint and said that
okay. Well, that shows that they're not buying into the bullshit.
yeah, and then at a later point, I've heard a lot of reports that there's been certain just random shows that the ASA and the Fisherman magazine specifically is involved in, that the ASGA is originally supposed to speak at, where speakers from the ASGA are invited. And then those same speakers are told very directly, we actually were told by the Fisherman magazine that we have to choose them or you. And if we allow you to speak at our event, they're going to pull all their support from us. And
ASA just sounds like a joke. I mean, they just sound like a marketing agency.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, the one quote that I'll never forget is 2 years ago when it was at the Amendment 7 meeting, Mike Ween, the spokesperson for the American Sport Fishing Association. It was the meeting I was talking about earlier. It was actually 3 years ago where there was that 90% vote to the 10% vote where the ASA tried to get involved and get their people riled up, and they didn't do a great job. Only less than a couple hundred people showed up for them, and there was close to 2,000 people that wrote individual letters advocating for some type of management action. And when Mike Ween had his chance to talk, he said,
Who's that now?
he's the spokesperson for the American Sport Fishing
Okay.
Association.
Okay.
And he said, all I'm hearing looking at this is the same old voices that have been involved with this for years. And we have to ask ourselves, what have we gotten from listening to these same 500, 600 anglers that show up year after year and say the same things? What we're going to do as an organization is get different people involved and bring the stakeholders to the table whose opinions we actually represent. And I thought, in a way, that was very self-revealing by accident.
Yeah.
To these meetings years after year, who had no financial interest in going, who decided to drive an hour and a half away on a Tuesday night right after they got off work to comment on the fishery they care about. This organization does not value or care about their opinions. And when they came back next time, they had signatures going all the way down to Georgia. It was people from all over their web where they sent out their mass email chain with the pre-written letter just saying, press this one button and sign on. And the thing that they weren't prepared for is the ASMFC keeps track of a lot of those demographics. And they came out and publicly, as much as the ASA touted, oh, most of these anglers are in support of no conservation measures and a status quo. The ASMFC came out and said, that's actually not true. In the demographic of recreational anglers, they were still in favor of a conservation action.
Oh, okay.
97% of commercial anglers
We're
and
opposed.
1,500 people pressed a button to sign one letter where they didn't have to make any changes.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
it was pretty misleading.
Yeah. So when your membership doesn't support the organization, you just change your membership. That's what I'm hearing there.
Pretty much.
Okay, I typed in, how is American Sport Fishing Association funded? The ASA is primarily funded through membership dues from companies in the sport fishing industry, revenue from its annual trade show, CAST, and other industry-related events. Additional funding comes from federal grants for conservation and economic research, such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I bet all those grants are probably about R3, would be my guess.
Yeah, if you go on their website, it's the second or third thing that comes up is a big article about R3 that no matter what time of year you go on there, it's always the first or second thing that comes up about how
I have a hard time believing that they're funding much in the way of, like, why is this species of fish in decline? It's probably like, how do we overcome barriers to fishing recruitment?
Well, a lot of where their funding goes to is, like I was hinting at earlier, is these efforts to, I don't know if you've followed any of this stuff going on in Florida right now with the red snapper, but kind of trying to strip away this ability of the federal government to step in and say, hey, you guys aren't doing a good job. You have to be a little bit more strict with this fishery. And allowing the states to say, okay, we're going to decide our own seasons. We're going to decide our own quotas. And under the last administration, it was a little bit more difficult for them to do that just for political reasons, like anything else. And now under the current administration, they found an administration that in the past has ruled in favor in 2020 when they've tried to take actions like this before. So now they're really trying to push that envelope forward while they have the opportunity, especially in states like Florida, Louisiana, other places in the South that have a little bit more of a consistency where you can get a Republican governor, the Republican president, and just kinda everyone on the same page.
When it comes to politics, they're always going to want whatever entity is least inclined to conserve the fishery, they're going to want them to win.
Yeah.
If the state of Florida was highly concerned about some fishery, but the federal government thought it was okay. The ASA would be like, let the feds take care of it. We don't need the states getting involved, right? Right? It'd be my guess.
Great. I mean, because the thing that really makes it a little bit more evident is the pack that they have. If you look at where the politicians they allocate their funding to, a lot of it obviously is along coastal centers. And then there's a few areas that become a little bit, you're like, why is there a politician in Minnesota getting funding from them? Until you realize that it's someone that sits on the Land and Natural Resource Committee and they're giving funding, whether they're Republican or Democrat, to every single person that sits on the Water Use Committee.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a thing of they dip.
God, that's so sleazy.
Exactly.
That is so sleazy, man.
And it's all the standard tricks of stay under the radar by giving the $4,999 donation, $4,999 donation. And then it gets
that's like, okay, how does that help you stay under the radar?
It keeps you under, if you donate over $5,000 to a political campaign, I forget the specific term for it, but it puts it in a different category where you now have to report a lot of additional data about your organization, things like that. Where it makes
so you're saying ASA and CCA might donate to some politician that's in line with their interests, but they don't want the public to know, so they donate less. They donate just under this disclosure cap.
Yeah, and then what gets even stranger is if you look at some of their most favored politicians that have been consistently in favor of deregulation, and you look at, like, if you choose a date, let's say they donated on February 24th, and then you look at the donations that politician got around February 24th, there will be the $4,999 donation from ASA, but then there will be the $4,999 donation from Glenn Hughes, their president, and an additional $4,999 donation from the lawyer, and then
unreal
4 or 5 donations. So you total them up, it comes to like a $30,000 donation over a 3-day period, but it's all by individuals who are not donating through the ASA, but it's all these members on the executive board. Or
unreal. How did you piece all that together?
I mean, basically, it sounds awful to say, but out of spite, after my experience with dealing with that data in my thesis and kind of seeing firsthand, these people don't really care about funding real research. They're trying to fund a narrative, fund a story. I just almost like conspiratorial mindset about it, where I was the guy with like the clipboard or the pinup board putting together all the finances. And then it was kind of just dumb luck if I came across Charles Witek and Tony Friedrich, and I followed the American Saltwater Guides Association for years. But
which is the One Angler's Voyage? What's his name?
His name is Charles Witek.
So Charles, would this be like a project that he would do too, where he tracks the money, follows the money, like you're talking about?
I mean, he's done so much more than I have, where a lot of the inspiration has come from his writing, where I've just kind of then looked into it a little more in certain things where it's been my interest. But the thing that's really incredible is when
you're really opening my eyes to some stuff in this conversation. So I really appreciate it. I mean, my blood is kind of boiling right now. But anyway, I interrupted you.
The thing that's really incredible is when you read through just a few of his articles throughout the years, kind of skimming through them, you see that the stuff when I found out a lot of this stuff, I thought I had found the nail in the coffin. I started filing Freedom of Information requests, and then I started reading his writing, and I realized I was just skimming the cream off the top, and that there's things 100 times worse that aren't concealed at all, that it's pretty publicly well available knowledge, even quotes that some of these like speakers have said in meetings throughout the years that just haven't gained traction, like things like every striped bass that dies to old age is an economic loss. And you think about the ramifications of what that would mean in something like hunting, for example. how do you have a resource if nothing dies of old age?
You're
That
right,
resource
right,
vanishes.
right. Well, even with the fish, right? Yeah. So, do you think this is abrupt change of topic, but I don't want to leave it if you've got more to say about that stuff? You good with that?
Yeah, I'm all good with that.
Okay, that was a good primer on where their money has made it be the case that in fishing that what's right for the fisherman and right for the fish might not be right for the fishing industry, and the fishing industry they're the ones pulling the strings, I guess would be how I'd summarize all of this.
Yeah.
Does that seem about right to you?
Yeah.
So what I thought we were going to talk about was more, and I'm glad we didn't because this is way more interesting, is fisher recruitment. And like crowding is a huge issue in fishing, you know.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you, do you think that I struggle with how to say this. Do you think that people that fish are happier than people that don't fish?
I think it depends on the reasons I think it's very similar to anything in outdoors. If you're fishing for the result rather than fishing because you want to be fishing, probably makes you less happy if you don't get that result, if you don't get the Instagram post or something that day. But if it's a thing of you're going fishing because you want to be outside and the fish you catch is the icing on the cake, I think overall it probably does make people a little bit happier, maybe less stressed.
If anything that encourages people to go outside.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're doing it to get out there instead of doing it to achieve a certain goal to post on Instagram or to make the YouTube video, I think generally unless, like, something crazy happens, most of the time when I'm out on the water, I'm pretty happy unless I just fell on my ass or something like that.
Oh, I'm only happy if I'm catching fish. I'm a little different than you. Like I got to be catching something or I'm pretty bored. What did you go ice fishing for?
I do a little bit of everything. I really like pike. They're my weird preferred
Oh, do you
right.
stab them or do you tip up them or what?
I do a lot of jigging and tip ups.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, most of my friends are real into pike fishing. I like to catch, so I'll be out there with them and they'll be fishing pike, and I like to jig up perch.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my favorite fish.
Yeah.
I think they're my favorite fish overall. I just think they're a cool fish. They're like a everyman's fish, you know, and just you don't need expensive stuff to catch them. You don't have to be an experienced angler to catch them. They're very abundant, and I think they're beautiful, and I think I've never had a better eating fish. I've fished the Pacific, I've fished the Sea of Cortez, I've fished the Caribbean, I've fished the Atlantic. I have a cabin in Southeast Alaska. I've eaten a lot of different fish. I don't think there's anything better than a perch or a bluegill, you know? So I just have a real warm spot for perch. But
Something about them too. When I think of the way a fish looks, that's like the fish to me. Like there's just something about that, like
the
head coming down,
biblical fish. The biblical
exactly.
fish. Yeah. You know, like the little drawings of the fish that
Yeah.
you'll see in a Bible. Yeah, like that. Yeah. They're the paradigmatic fish shape.
Yeah.
So there was a study. I Googled this shortly before we started talking. I got off the page. I'm gonna have to pull it up again. 1 second, let me pause.
No worries.
I don't want people to wait while I look this up. So what I found was this study that was funded by the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation, the nonprofit that Doge defunded.
Yeah.
I didn't say this, but they lost $14 million in federal funding and had to lay off a bunch of people. And like I say, they were responsible for the Take Me Fishing program.
Yeah.
And so this is all self-reporting data. It says among women who fish, 1 in 4 say it improves their mood, brings them peace, and helps them manage their mental health and long-term stress. 1 in 4.
That's not
like a ringing endorsement. Women who fish have greater perseverance and are more likely to say that setbacks do not discourage them. So imagine they took some women that fish and some women that don't.
Yeah.
And asked them, do you consider yourself to have high perseverance? And they got more women that fish said they were. Almost half of women who fish say that fishing teaches them patience and helps to develop their confidence. Almost half. That's not a lot, again. Okay, so with all of those, one thing that comes to mind is, what would they say about the activity they were doing if they weren't fishing?
Yeah.
Right? And then the other thing is, with studies like this, you risk getting the cause and the effect separate.
Yeah.
Where it could be that, very easily could be that the sorts of women that go fishing are the sorts of women that have higher perseverance, for example, right?
Yeah.
So reverse causation.
Yeah.
So I find this is a question that's been of enduring interest to me, because one argument for hunter recruitment and fisher recruitment, which is both things I oppose, is that, we need to share, you don't want other people to have the chance. Well, that argument doesn't have much value if bringing people into the pastime doesn't make them happier.
Yeah.
So I'm not aware of, this is not convincing clinical evidence that making someone fish makes them happier. And I'm aware of no evidence that making somebody a hunter makes them happier. But although there's a whole bunch of evidence that degrading the quality of the experience for people that already hunt and fish, that makes them less happy.
Yeah.
And one thing that does that is crowding.
Yeah.
How would you get to the bottom of whether or not, for me to be convinced, I'm just curious to hear your take, what you think of this, that making somebody fish made them happier? You'd have to randomly assign subjects to a fishing group and a no fishing group.
And then you'd have to add in the outdoors without fishing for the control.
There's another. Yeah. Very good point. Yeah. You have to have 3. You get assigned to a non-fishing but outdoor recreate. Like, you get a bunch of even the fact that you get volunteers, like somebody comes into the clinic and says, I want to volunteer for the study, that's already problematic, because the sorts of people that go into the clinic and volunteer for the study might not be representative of the society. But let's just say for the sake of argument that they are. Yeah, but then you have three groups. We're like, you're going to spend 2 hours a week fishing. You guys are going to go about your business and do whatever you want. Just don't go fishing.
And I mean, if you look at how a lot of the R3, at least since fishing is pushed, there's always the big social aspect of it too.
Right.
So then you got added
right.
group of,
Yep.
oh, you hang out by the river, you're outside, but you're not fishing. You're just hanging out, playing volleyball, doing the social activity or the sharing the culture or tradition.
Yeah. There is a trick that, and maybe you're aware of this, that you can use to make causal inferences from observational data. And I've used it. There's multiple tricks for this, but one of them that I've used is instrumental variables analysis. Are you familiar with that?
Not really.
Okay. So what you would need to do an instrumental variables analysis to figure out if people that fish are happier than people that don't fish. You need a variable that influences their likelihood of fishing, but doesn't influence their happiness outside of influencing whether or not they fish. So let me give you an example. Let's say that the distance someone lives from the nearest body of water doesn't influence their happiness, but it influences outside of maybe influence. Okay, if the distance they live from water influences their happiness, it's only through influencing whether or not they fish.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a variable that influences the response variable, happiness, but only by influencing the predictor variable, whether or not they fish.
Yeah.
Then you could, if you could make headway. If you had something like that. This has been used a lot.
Yeah.
In various contexts.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I feel like,
but I don't think that's there's I don't think that's a valid instrument, because I suspect that all else equal, people that live closer to bodies of water are happier regardless of whether they fish or not.
I would agree with that. And then I think the thing that makes it even more complicated is there's no catch and release hunting. So it's a little bit easier to treat hunters as
wait. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's pretty large angler demographics that, for example, only prioritize harvest, or the day isn't a great, like you catch 20 fish, but they're all short, not a great day, compared to another angler where he only does catch and release. And if he sees an angler practicing harvesting, that's degraded the quality of his experience because he didn't want to see that. And it's just such a strange, like, pastime compared to something like hunting, where I feel like there's just so many niche demographics within fishing of, like, even the stranger small things like tenkara versus fly fish.
Right. I have no sympathy for people that just catch fish and let them go. Like,
yeah.
Do you?
I mean, I think it depends.
Why worry the fish if you're not even going to eat it?
Yeah. I think with coastal fisheries, I feel a little less like that than I do with freshwater fisheries, where I feel like it's just so non-selective, where you go out to fish for one fish, you catch 30 of the wrong fish before you catch the
Right.
fish.
Well, then, yeah, you have to, by law, let them go then. I can get behind that.
Yeah. Or even like for something like stripers is more my thought of like, I feel like the regulations aren't doing enough. So I take my own personal stance of I could catch the keeper, but I still don't want to keep a striper. I'll catch if I caught like a bluefish or even like a tuna or something that was in a slot. Yeah, I'll keep that fish. But the
I guess I
stripers
shouldn't. Yeah, I shouldn't be so dogmatic about it. This is what I'm saying is not normative. Like you shouldn't catch and release fish. It's descriptive. I'm saying I personally have no interest in catch and release fishing.
Yeah.
If I'm going to catch a fish, I want to
from
eat it.
from a fishery management perspective too, it's a strange thing of it's gotten tons of praise for certain things for the right reasons, where there's certain fisheries we obviously can't just all harvest them. Just there's not enough of the resource to handle that pressure. But there's a lot of other things that people love, like largemouth bass, for example, where from a fishery management perspective, exclusive catch and release, it's pretty hard to argue anything other than that it harms the fishery. There's not a pretty great argument to be made that every
No.
person releasing every bass they catch is helping all these stunted bass.
Here's a mainstream argument that you could hear. Participation in fishing predisposes one to care about fisheries conservation. So people that practice catch and release are more inclined to fight for conservation. That would be like a mainstream argument for catch and release.
Yeah. And I think in certain cases, I think there's a lot of leeway. I think with all this stuff, I think there's a lot of anglers that come to mind I know personally where I'm like, yeah, they're a great example of that. But then I can think of 100 other anglers where I'm like, that guy is a terrible example of that, and the antithesis of that, of he's never killed a fish, intentionally, but every fish he drags up the bank and does the 5-minute photo shoot with or Instagram reel of is probably
not gonna fare well.
out.
Yeah. Agreed. There's a form of fishing where you get to eat it even though you release it. Do you know what that
What's
is?
that? I do not.
Stone crab fishing.
I thought of that at the last time.
Have you ever done that?
I haven't.
Oh.
It seems like a blast, though.
Well, there's lots of different ways people do it, but
yeah,
you go out at night with a flashlight. That's how I did it when I was a little kid in Florida, and you can take one claw. But I did it more recently in the Bahamas, and we were out in this like grass flat and like 4 feet of water and just snorkeling around until you find a hole.
Yeah.
And they're pretty descript looking holes. They go down at an angle and then parallel the surface of the sand. They're not straight down, they're at an angle. And then when you find one, you put your hand in that hole, which is terrifying, along the top of the hole. I mean, nothing's got a stronger claw than that. You've seen the claws on them.
Yeah.
You put your hand on the top of the hole and you ride the top of the hole with your hand until you can feel it, and you get behind it and scoop it out real quick, and then grab it, and then you take a knife and separate off the claw at the joint.
Yeah.
It was super fun, but scary. It'd be interesting. I should Google that. Like, do people ever get their finger broken by if you're going to get your finger broken by a crab, a stone crab would be a damn good candidate, I would think.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be pretty brutal.
Yeah. Hey man, this was fun. I enjoyed talking to you.
I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh yeah, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I'm really looking forward to looking up Charles and see if I can learn a little bit more, because this intersection of industry and conservation nonprofit thing is something that needs to be exposed and talked about and considered more, in my view. So
Yeah, he's the guy to talk to about it. I can't think of anyone better than the guy that used to be the co-vice chair of the organization who's spent the past 20 years trying to expose what they've turned into.
Would you want to come on with us if I can get him to agree to come on?
If he wants to, I'd do it, but I think he has enough to say. He probably doesn't need any assistance from me, you know what I mean?
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, any ideas, any thoughts you have, anything I can do to help, please let me know. Best of luck with, finding a degree program and charting the next chapter of your career.
Appreciate it.
Wish you the best of luck, Paul, and don't be intimidated by these bastards, man. You just keep saying what needs to be said. And
I
the
try
rest
my
will,
best.
yeah.
You only can sell your soul once, and then it's on rent for the rest of your life.
Yeah, true that. All right. Good night.
Have a nice night, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, back at you. Bye.
Bye-bye.